just landed in Leadership and Enlightenment, a podcast where the guests are exceptional humans that have faced their fears to crest into their best selves, growing into a way they can help their communities, creating opportunities, and sharing their secrets and their tips that they learned along the way. Without further ado, here we are, my friends. Have a great time today and enjoy Leadership and Enlightenment. Travis, good to meet you today, my friend. I know we met on social media, and this is one of those cool things about the world that we live in now, that we actually can make friends and have conversations without having to be in front of each other.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love it. I've met a lot of people through social media. It's been a good thing, both personally and professionally for me.
Were you always like that? I mean, when I came out of my old corporate career, man, I had like a BlackBerry and a beeper still, I think. I had to learn all this in the last 5 years.
No, I will talk about it, but I do public speaking now, and I used to hate public speaking, and I wrote a book, and I didn't like writing, and so just some things changed in my life, which caused me to dive into it, and now it's become a passion and a calling for me. So yeah.
Brother, you sound exactly like me. I came out of a hotel career. I really enjoyed coaching my teams. That was my favorite part. I love the business. I didn't like the administrative part. That stuff was just driving me crazy. You know, it just seemed like I was doing way more. I'm like a little sage on my side, doing way more in my life than was where I was, my passions or my traction points. And coming back out into this world and finding the ability to contribute has been just a pure joy for me. And I know we kind of touched base a little bit ago in your story as far as coming through, the educational background that you came through and finding yourself in that. I want to peel you back a little bit before that, though, if you don't mind. Give us a glimpse of Travis coming out of high school. Where were you? Where were you living? What were you into? What were you looking at?
So I graduated in a small school, Wilton Public School, which is just south of Bismarck, the capital of North Dakota.
Cool.
There couldn't have been many kids. There's 30 kids in my class as a senior, and I wanted to coach basketball. Basketball's been a passion of mine, and so I really went into college trying to find a coaching spot where I could start my career in coaching, and that led me obviously into education, because back in the day, teachers were coaches, and so it led me into education. And I went to college for a couple of years at Bismarck State, and then I went in North Dakota to Dickinson State to finish my teaching bachelor's degree, and did that and coached, and then got my first teaching gig in the eastern side of the state. And so spent a few years over there, and then ended up into administration. And so
awesome.
Really, it was about sports and basketball for me that led me into the profession of being in education.
Yeah, we never really find like the pathway when we get that calling, and you get the ping, but you're not quite sure why you did what you did, and here you are, right? But there's some stuff that came out of that really pushed you into the life you're in now. What was it that really transpired in that time frame?
Yeah, I think early on in my career as a teacher, I was just really trying to go through the motions, and I was really focused on content and conforming to what the system wanted. And in 2010, I took my first principal position in Cooperstown, North Dakota, which is, for purposes of people not knowing North Dakota, it's eastern side of the state. It was first couple months on the job as a principal. I had a student come into my office, and she was distraught, and something had been bothering her, but she wasn't able to tell me what, because she was pretty down. And so, I got her in touch with our counselor and that sort of thing. But later that night, she actually lived across the street from us. And later that night, she came over to my house, and she knocked on the door, and she was ready to tell me the who, the what, the where, the when, the how, the things that were bothering her. And I told her, rather than letting her in the house, I just said to my office tomorrow, and I'll take care of it. And I got a call later that morning the next morning that she had taken her own life that night.
No.
And so, yeah, honestly, it's just one of those things where it just really changed my perspective on how we do education, obviously, for sure, but how we live. Like I always say this, is that we see people with we see with our eyes, and we don't see with our hearts. And sometimes our eyes can blind us from reality. And it was in those moments after that I just realized that in education and in life now, we focus on the wrong things sometimes. We focus on grades and GPA and standards and this and that, and we forget that there's a whole child behind the grades and the standards and those sorts of things. And so I've really just challenged myself to try to get schools to basically operate outside of the conformity box. Like, there's so many things that you have to do to conform in schools nowadays, but they don't talk about character. and they don't talk about the whole child and so or the passions of students. And so really my focus in education was making sure that my school was a school that celebrated the individuality and the passions of every student that came through the door. Because in reality, 1 in 4 students coming through our school doors today have mental wellness issues or mental illness issues, and one
Yeah.
in four
Yeah.
adults do too. So that's really been the thing that changed me, and I've kind of been on a mission since then to just change the way we think about schools, but also change the way we think about just day-to-day life in general.
Yeah. Travis, you're touching that residence bone inside of me, and I write about this in my book too. In the beginning of my life, it felt like I was taken to these dogmatic scenarios where I was expected to do things, and people around me were expected to do things, but they really weren't tuned in to the reasons why we were there. And I grew up, neurodivergent. I'm on the spectrum, ADD, OCD, little dyslexia mixed in there. It's fun. And I remember specifically a situation in third grade where my mother was brought in to observe my reading because they thought I had a deficiency. What it was is I was aware that the word AS and BUT to me sounded like bad words. I thought it was ass and butt. So I would read what they told me, but just skip over those words.
Sure.
And it freaked them out. They didn't understand what was going on. And when my mother asked me, "Hey, honey, how come you're skipping this word and that word?" I looked over and I said, "Mom, those are bad words." She said, "No, honey, that's not what those mean. I mean this." And then I read it just like they expected. But it dawned on me that I wasn't being taught in the style the way I learned. And I had to become a self learner because the system really taught more that idea of the masses of what was they expected. But the exceptional students are the ones that really had unique abilities. They generally fell into this category of they don't really fit in, so let's help them fit in. And yet that real strength of who we are, that light within us was extinguished at that moment. And we had to find it later on in our own ways, or life had to show it to you again, like it showed it to you. What are some of the things you do to help your students be able to, cross that path from being taught to learning?
Yeah, really think it just comes down to hearing the stories of our students. Like I said just a little bit ago, I think we get so much caught back into the content. Like we have to have this curriculum and we got to make sure every kid or every learner gets to this point, and we forget about the stories behind it. And you just told a very good one. And I think it's important that before we teach kids, we should reach kids. Before we test kids, we should invest in kids.
Yeah, I love it.
The 3 R's, the reading, writing, arithmetic. There's one that's more important, and that's relationships. And if you take care of
Hmm.
relationships, the other 3 will probably take care of themselves. And so I really think understanding every child has a story and knowing that story when they come into your classroom and knowing what their passion is, and then trying to tie their passion to their learning is the
Hmm.
best way we can go about it in schools. But the system's
Yeah.
not set up that way, and so we have to obviously get
Well,
through
it's
some hoops
not.
to do that.
Well, I'll reflect back into it from a corporate side. I've had this conversation a lot with friends and colleagues from back in the day, and we collectively are a little offended by the idea of this tired culture that we came out of, but that was the only strategy we knew back then. We weren't taught any other alternative ways of doing things, so we just invested ourselves into that. And I think the school industry, like you're in, probably did the same thing. And they took on the strategy that they were being given, and you became the best strategist at that as you could. But we're all being faced with this question now in all types of business, the events industry and the schooling industry is like, what can we do individually to invest ourselves into shining, our own personal leadership of light and allowing those children to feel comfortable in your scenario to be open to you? I think it comes from the education of the individuals, the teachers themselves, to realize like that's a potential of theirs. I didn't know I had it. I had to learn that there was potential in me like that. And are you focusing on the teachers in a certain way too to help them kind of grow into it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so one of the years in school when I was still a superintendent in school, we had a staff room where we had all the kids' names on a poster board, and next to their names, I know this child, I know their passion, and I would recognize this child in the hallway. And the whole point was when the teachers came into the staff room, they could look at the students, and if they didn't have check marks, it was one that they had to go and catch up with. Well,
Yeah.
that transcended into our staff because there was one day I was walking through the hallways and one of my staff members approached me and said, "Well, do you know what my passion is?" And I said, yeah, we so focus on
Yeah.
students that we forget that the adults need it too, And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think I think one thing about leadership that I've carried with me for since then till now, and even as I work for an architect firm as a business developer, is that the best way for me to define good leadership and to ensure that the culture and climate of a school district or organization is well, is that when you talk to a manager, you feel like they are important. But when you talk to a leader, you feel like you are important. And
Yeah.
so I've always wanted to have that mindset when I'm having conversations with people that, yes, I'm a superintendent and it's a position, but leadership isn't a position and it's not a title, it's an action and it's a way of life. And so if I can lift others around me, then I'm going to lift the organization. Right. And so
Yeah.
that's really how I've thought about leadership and how to, change the culture of an organization for the better.
Yeah, I think that you're on an amazing path. I reflect back into that. I was defined once as being codependent, and I didn't understand how to do life outside of that way and structure that I was taught. And the person was so wise. They said to me, just shine your light as bright as you can and let others follow it. And I really find that as the definition of a CEO or a superintendent, as you are. It's the representative of the community that's done the work on themselves to allow themselves to be there for others. And I'm working with a young student. She's out of college, and I can see in her eyes, she's a CEO, but she's got 15 years to grow to get there. And that's what we're working on is what does that mean to her? And we were really working on the self-awareness of how others are seeing you through their eyes. And what is it that you're involved in and being aware of that as well, instead of just following this, natural energy or this path or this inertia that's in front of you, but setting that stage yourself and realizing like, this is my opportunity to learn. I'm in front of all these amazing representatives in life in my business, and I can take in their personality traits and their types, but also realize like there is a purpose behind leadership and that interaction. And we can take it into the school district as well. But how do we cross through that purpose into, like you said, being that inspiration? And I think it is just shining that light like you do every day as bright as you can and let others follow that curiosity and go, huh, what's Travis doing over there, man? That seems like it's really working.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot tougher said than done. I mean, I've set out on a mission to try to change education since 2010, and I've hopefully along the way I've inspired a few people to inspire other people. And so I have to credit people that believed in me
Yeah.
and that I was able to reach out to as a young principal when that happened in 2010. I was naive enough to think that nobody wanted to talk to a first year principal. And there's a lot of great administrators in the state of North Dakota. And I was thinking, why would they want to hear from me? But once I made
Right.
that initial call and once I made those connections, I realized that they too, even though that they were veterans in the field, they had stories and they were going through some of the similar stuff I was. Really just, putting yourself with people that lift you up and are going through some of the same things, I think is important. Yeah, change is hard as well know, and trying to get people to buy into
Yeah.
maybe GPA is not as important as a child's story.
Yeah.
People people don't necessarily go along with that because the system doesn't measure their stories.
Well, it also shows that, we're coming out of that old culture of that spreadsheet where you need a bottom line understanding for what your efforts are. I say, why don't we develop a spreadsheet that's a circle? I mean, like, why does it have to lead to that? Why can't it just be everything around us and take all those things into consideration? And I believe that you're bringing that additional dimension to your industry. That there is a development stage that goes right through your career that we can't change and allow these vessels to find who their truth is. And we've extinguished that in a lot of ways as a society when they're around 4 or 5 or 6. Just in their training alone, we extinguish all that ability to find their uniqueness out of the character that it isn't aligned. It doesn't
Oh,
fall into that circle spreadsheet. It falls into a bottom line because that's how we were taught. But you and I are breaking that mold of thought. We don't know exactly where it's going to lead us, but man, I think you're on an amazing mission, brother. It's so inspiring to see how you're out there and how you fell into your greatness without looking for it, that it wasn't something that you were invested into. It's a value that you're offering. And I think that's where the real power of all this comes from.
Yeah, and you said probably the most important word of all is you said connection, and I've been saying it for so long is like the number one thing that we can give each other as human beings, as leaders, as as teachers, as I'm working for in an architect firm now, is connection. I think that's the number one thing that we can provide for people is connection, because when they feel connected to something, they feel like they belong, they feel valued.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's the one thing. Like my book is Connection Over Conformity that I wrote.
I love that.
And it talks about how, conforming to a system is one thing, but connecting with people is another, a whole
I
nother
have to
level.
read it. I have to read it, brother. That sounds exactly like what I was reading about, to conformity. Wow. So now you said you're working with a different firm. You're out of the schooling district realm. Why did
Yeah.
you make that choice to go
Well,
into this and do this?
it's honestly, this architect firm, because working for an architect was never on my bingo card or whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah, I'm so curious.
I can't. I'm a liability with a shovel and everything. But this architect firm did a project for us at the school that I was the superintendent at, and I kind of connected with them and created some relationships with them, and I was able to get them in connection with other school districts, and so they kind of tried to bring me on. And there's one day I was sitting in the living room here with my wife, and I just told her, I said, things are good. I have a great school board. I have a great community. Staff is great. But I said, I don't know what it's like maybe to not feel stressed. Like, I don't know if I've ever felt not stressed. And this architect firm was knocking on our door. And so we decided to try it. And I quickly learned that my passion for education and well-being of other people could play an important role in the architect firm, because like I say this, it's just like music puts us in a mood when we listen to it. Space has the ability to do the same thing when we walk into a space. And so now I
Yeah.
work with mainly K-12. So I work with school districts on creating space. I work them through the referendum process and trying to get their project passed, number one. But I also am there to help them in the design phase, to help them create space where students and staff can connect with each other.
Get out.
And then they
That
let
is
me go
cool.
and they let me go and speak. Like I like to speak to students. I always tell them that never neglect your passion, because my passion was
Yeah.
to play in the NBA basketball star, which obviously didn't work out for me, and it led me to working for an architect firm.
Hmm.
So I mean, your passion's going to lead you all over the place, and you just have to embrace it, right? That you get to spend your whole life trying to figure that out
Yeah.
and to follow that.
And creating that adventure in your own self, where once you flip that script and you stop working for money but you work for a passion, you can see this. And this has come out in many conversations to this podcast. Somebody started here and ended up here. It's not an even path. I love to say, like, hey, we created the play ring, so you should really enjoy the fact that you're the maestro there. And those pain points, those were ways to kick you back this way and kick you back that way, because it's not linear. It moves all over the place. And so I want to ask you how you felt in these two scenarios and see if it was similar to mine. When I was in my corporate career and I was driving through life, like you said, I never knew what it was like not to feel stress. I felt like I was on this ladder or this staircase trying to get somewhere to achieve this place that would ultimately cause peace and I would be comfortable. And I never existed. It never got there. Even when I got to that top and busted through that layer 3 times, I could never find it. And it was frustrating for me. And that was what drove me inside to really find, I guess, my conversation within myself to figure out what it is. And now where I am, it feels like I'm in the rings of a tree. I'm always in the right place at the right time. I'm never feeling like I'm driving through my purpose, but it is expanded in this place where I can barely keep up with it. I'm just this cog in the wheel now of this whole experience. And it feels to me like you're in that same place, man, the way that you're doing what you're doing.
100%. I mean, I'm a faith guy, so I've always asked God to just reveal what it is that He wants me to
Yeah.
do, and like if this is my calling or is there more? And I always felt that there's more, and I think now I'm just starting to realize that what I'm doing is enough. Like I am able to go and speak and inspire people as best I can. And I believe that's the purpose. And now that I'm working with this architect firm and they allow me to go do that, it just seems like, um, maybe it was right
And
in
you,
front of me the whole time, and maybe I was there,
yeah.
just like you said.
You were. And you are. And that's the lesson. That's the enlightenment that you've worked through to get to, is that we can appreciate that. And I see the same thing in my life. The factors, the circumstances, the tools, they haven't changed much. It's how I view, what I'm going into. Do you have a daily practice, a prayer practice that you do in the morning where you
Yeah,
set these
it's pretty
stages?
pretty I'm pretty quiet about it. I mean, I drive a lot, and so
You do
when
it
I'm
then,
going
yeah.
up. Yeah, I get up in the morning and I might be driving to another school or,
Yeah.
and so I spend a lot of my time on the road. And
Yeah.
so if you could be a fly in my vehicle, you'd know that I talk to myself all the time.
It's great. I'm somehow part of this cog in a wheel, but if I find my balance in it, man, does it work in a really amazing way. The blessings and, call them miracles if you want. They're incredible to watch.
Stories much like mine. And when I wrote my book, like I said, I didn't really like to write. But so I threw the first two copies in the garbage after I was done before I published them. And finally I just said, I'm gonna put this out there. If my mom and my wife are the only ones that read it, then
Yeah.
it is what it is. And it's kind of taken off. A lot of schools have used it and
That's
read it.
so
And
cool.
it's yeah,
That's so cool.
it's gone a lot better than I thought it was gonna go. But
Yeah,
I'm
but
glad
that's
I
that
did.
message. That's that message inside you coming out, man. That thing that we didn't quite figure out, but we went forward with. And it's really neat to see in your life, my friend. Tell everybody where they can find you. You're going to be out there speaking soon. Is there a way they can connect with you?
The best way to connect with me is I'm on all the socials, but X is probably the best one. I connect
Okay.
with more professionals there. LinkedIn. I have
Awesome.
a couple different pages, but my X handle is SUPT_Jordan JORDAN. So yeah,
Awesome.
Beulah, North
I'll have,
Dakota, small town in the middle of North Dakota, just trying to make a difference.
I love that. I'm about an hour south of Reno in a place I would call nowhere land on 5 acres next to some farmers and ranchers. And it's the same thing. You can affect from wherever you're at.
Yeah,
I love that. Anything you want to leave the audience with before we wrap this up today? I mean, this has been a really fun conversation, brother.
yeah.
And I appreciate what you do for life and people.
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. The one thing I tell people when I leave my conversations, when I'm keynote speaking or whatever, is just to not miss an opportunity to hear somebody's story. I missed an
Mm,
opportunity to listen to that child's
yeah.
story in 2010, and I never obviously got to hear it. And so I tell people, like, everybody has a story. We always say keeping up with the Joneses. Well, the Joneses have issues too, and everybody's got a story, and that I know we're busy in our lives and we're chasing kids and we're trying to hold down jobs and stuff. And I think at the end of the day, a smile to somebody, a hello to somebody, a conversation with somebody goes a long ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Basics, brother, but really wise and impactful. Thanks for your time today, Travis. I appreciate it, man.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Well, there we go. Another amazing example of the universe working in its magnificent way today. Appreciate you showing up and look forward to seeing you again at Leadership and Enlightenment.